Hey everyone, Aiden here, and welcome to part 8 of my Castlevania Symphony of the Night Luck Mode completion run. Due to the nature of this video, I figured I'd do a small intro to explain a few things. And since I'm going to be doing the item grinding off screen, like, well, not really off screen, but outside of a part recording, I should say. I'll just be splicing when the items drop from each enemy, the ones that I'm missing anyways. And basically it's kind of gonna be a post-recording commentary. I haven't done one of these since I had to do one for for an assignment back when I attended Full Sail for a year. But basically the gist is for each enemy I'm going to be showing momentarily something like this, as well as somewhere on the image, or maybe its own separate image, how long it took for me to get. So this could very well end up taking me a while. Now, one thing to note when it comes to what you're seeing on the screen right now is the number in the top right. This is the number according to the enemy list that the Master Librarian has. So do keep that in mind. It is, oddly enough, it's different from the way the bestiary is for anyone making notes of that. As far as like ones I've looked at on Game FAQs or even the same Castlevania fandom sites, separate bestiary outside of the Master Librarian enemy list item shop, shop item list and whatnot. So I figured I'd give heads up on that. And with all that said, hopefully this turns out relatively well. And honestly, I'm kind of hoping this is gonna be the only part where I have to do any item grinding, but we'll see. If it does end up being more than one part, then I'm gonna separate them by castle. Whether it be the standard castle or the reverse castle. Anyways, with all that said, it's time to start the actual vid. Hope y'all enjoy. Alright, so first off, we have the entrance. There's technically 5 monsters, but we'll get to that in a moment. With 5 items amongst them remaining for me to get on this playthrough. And first off, we have the zombie, which are probably some of the easiest enemies for us to find. They're constantly spawning in the hallways to the left or right of the room with the big rock and the merman in it. So, we're going after the $100 bags that they drop. And it took me about 1 minute and 40 seconds to find. Next up, we have both kinds of mermen, and as per usual, I count both of them as one enemy, just due to the fact they both have the same item drops. And we're after the monster vial 1. Them, and that took me only 52 seconds. They spawn infinitely and in masse. En masse in the in the room with the big rock. After that, above and to the left of that room, which is basically to the right of the save room a little bit further, we can find the Gurkha. A tall green armor enemy that uses Gurkha knives. or Gurkha blades. And they dropped the combat knife and the gold plate. The combat knife took me about 1 minute 7 seconds, and the gold plate took about 9 minutes 12 seconds. So in total, it took about 10 minutes 19 seconds for me to finish off the item from Gurkha. Then we have Blade, which luckily we only have one. I had one item left to get. There is a better place for me to have farmed the gold plate from, but it's literally shortly before the tall, the vertical hall, vertical corridor that has the save room right next to it. Anyways, it took about 12 minutes 18 seconds as far as farming in that location goes. Up next, we have the Alchemy Lab, which there's only one monster that we've not gotten every item from, and there's only one item left for that monster. And that is the Green Axe Knight, the level 4 Axe Knight. Took about 4 minutes 48 seconds for me to get the Bronze Cuirass, and I found it easier for me to farm for that in the last room at the top of the Alchemy Lab, right before entering Marble Gallery, as one would normally do. Next up, we have the Marble Gallery. There's 8 monsters and 13 items amongst them. This one was a bit of a doozy, as far as, like, it felt like it took so much longer than it did. But, as far as clearing out this area. First off is the Ouija table. Easiest farming spot, in my opinion, right outside the first save room of the Marble Gallery. And it only took me 15 seconds to get the barley tea, which was the only remaining one for that. Going a little bit further down, along the path, way back to the Alchemy Lab, like along the lower route in the Marble Gallery, we come across the Slinger, the ones that I initially mistakenly called Skellerangs, and they only have one more drop for us, for me to get, and that's the Night Shield, which thankfully only took 55 seconds. It's literally right inside the room where the next 3-4 enemies are. Or next set of rooms, I should say. A little bit further down in the same room as the Slinger is the Marionette. And they drop, it took about 1 minute 43 seconds for them to drop the Circlet, which was the last one I needed from that monster. Thankfully, they aren't that much of a nuisance. Especially at my level. Current level. In the next room, well, technically 2 rooms away, in that long S-shaped corridor, we have a Plate Lord, 2 items each. The Iron Ball, which took about 6 minutes 11 seconds after it dropped the Neutron Bomb, which took me 3 minutes 18 seconds. So in total, it took about 9 minutes 29 seconds to finish off the item farm for the Plate Lord. Next up, we have the Ghost, which we only needed the Anti-Venom from, because we've already seen it drop the $400 bags. And it only took me 25 seconds. They literally spawn infinitely, and sometimes en masse, in the center hallway of that long winding corridor, and a little bit further down, right before the shortly before the exit into the lower section of the Alchemy Laboratory, we have the enemy known as Cthulhu, which, of course, go figure, is a misspelling of Cthulhu, but anyways. It drops the pentagram and the bat pentagram. Go figure, it dropped the bat pentagram first, which took about 6 minutes 29 seconds, and the pentagram itself took 4 minutes 46 seconds. In total, 11 minutes 15. Just to make sure I finished off the marble gallery in its entirety before moving on to the next area, I decided to clear out that long corridor before the outer wall, which have Stone Rose and Diplocephalus. But I found out, interestingly enough, while farming the Stone Rose, that if you just go back and forth between the two closest to the exit to the outer wall, Stone Rose spawn infinitely. Like, they'll spawn back in once you scroll them off screen, which made farming the Hide Cuirass and the Leather Shield so much easier to get. I am surprised that happened. Might have been a bug, I do not know. But it took 59 seconds for the Hide Cuirass and a minute 8 seconds for the Leather Shield. In total, 2 minutes 7 seconds. Sadly, the respawn after getting off-screened, can't say the same for the Diplocephalus. So I had to go off screen and yeah, like transfer rooms to get them to respawn. But anyways, they dropped a tart, which took a minute and 25 seconds, and the pentagram, which took about a minute 42. In total, the Diplocephalus took me about 3 minutes 7 seconds. And yeah, that's about it for the Marble Gallery. Alright, up next we have the Royal Chapel, which has 7 different enemies left and 14 items between them. First off, we have the Bone Pillar, which can be found literally right above and to the right of the save point in the bottom left of the Royal Chapel. And you can find them along the staircase as well as some corner guards. I ended up going for the one that's at the bottom of the stairs and then working my way up without killing anything else, like double jumping over them, and then slowly working on the spiked ball because it has its own drops. The bone pillars themselves, the only one item left is the ballroom mask, which took me about 3 minutes 9 seconds. As for the spiked ball, it dropped the iron ball in about 12 seconds, and it dropped a slew of them over the course of me trying to get the Axe Lord armor, which unfortunately I did end up messing up when it came time to clip me getting it to drop from the spiked ball. But it took me 22 minutes before the blasted thing dropped, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't feel like farming for that again just to have that footage. So I am sorry about that. Up next is the corner guard. Those are those knight enemies that you see along the same staircase. That also seem to get stuck on the corners of the stairs. They don't go along the flat surfaces. But the cutlass took 20 seconds for me to obtain. And then it took another 4 minutes and 29 seconds for the Damascus sword to drop. That was honestly not a lot of fun, but there's some worse enemy item drops out there, so. Anyways, a little bit further in, like a couple rooms away, we have the Spectral Sword. It's that one that's just sitting there in the middle of that big open space before the bell towers. The same room as the one right outside the Colosseum. Thankfully, we already have all of the puppet swords drops, which I believe was only the Takamitsu katana. But the spectral sword itself drops a broadsword, which it did so within 30 seconds, and the bastard sword, which took me 4 minutes 30 seconds for it to finally appear. The next 3 in this area, I'm not gonna lie, I did not like farming these. There's the winged guard. They're those infinitely spawning enemies that show up as you're making your way up each of the bell towers in the royal chapel. But anyways, they drop a javelin, which took me 2 minutes 45 seconds, and then 5 minutes 18 seconds after that, I finally got one to drop the iron shield. The Black Crow. There's only 3 in that same first bell tower that I used. And, well, I used the spiked room that, you need Mist and the Jewel of Open to be able to traverse for one of the 2 required rings. To basically leave the room and go back in through. Just to make things a little bit quicker, since the crows are literally right below. Anyways, they drop an aquamarine, which took about 1 minute 30 seconds to show up, and the red beam bone, which took 2 minutes and 53 seconds. That was fun, getting to drop down just to make sure it didn't drop anything. Same for the winged guards. But anyways, next up, just a little bit further up the same bell tower, is the Blue Raven. There's only 2 in this bell tower, but they're pretty close to one of the exits. They drop a Zircon, which took 1 minute and 33 seconds, and a pork bun, which took another 1 minute and 9 seconds. Using the same exit up at the top of the bell tower, as close to the top as you can get. The topmost exit, I should say. You can find the Bone Halberd, as well as some bats. Luckily, I only needed a javelin from this enemy, and it only took 52 seconds. Our next area is the Colosseum, with 7 enemies and 12 items between them. Funnily enough, on my way from the Royal Chapel, our next enemy, the Blade Soldier, dropped the only item left that I needed, the Namakura. It dropped it literally 6 seconds into the item grind. And it was on my way to the save point so that I could stop for the time being. In the upper area of the Colosseum, that uppermost path, you can find some blade soldiers, or a couple blade soldiers and 3 blade masters. The blade masters are what is next. They drop a shuttle, which it took 2 minutes, 2 minutes 9 seconds, as well as a cross shuriken, which took another 1:26. Down near the rightmost save point of the Colosseum, just a little ways to the left in the upper hall, down in the lower parts of the Colosseum, we have the Hunting Girl. I chose to farm for items off of this enemy here because, well, there's 2 of them on that small little pathway, and there's only 1 in that bell tower. It took 10 seconds for them to drop a cheesecake, and 35 seconds for them to drop the wereband. On the uppermost part of, well, not uppermost, but on the upper level of the lower Coliseum, near the left-hand side save point, is the Armor Lord. Took, let's see, 40 seconds for it to drop the rapier, and 47 seconds for it to drop the saber. I'm not gonna lie, that felt like it felt like it was gonna take. It felt a lot longer for the saber to drop. In the same, in the hallway where you get the shield rod, you can find 2 armor lords and 2 different sets of bone muskets. Each set of bone muskets bone musket always comes with 3 enemies. So you get 3 chances each for their items. Yay. In our case, we only needed a magic missile, and one dropped within 10 seconds of my entering that room. I wasn't even the one that killed it. That was all thanks to my sword familiar. After that, along the lower section, lower left-hand side of the Coliseum, we have the Owl Knight. Took 22 seconds to drop a cutlass, and let me tell you, it dropped a lot of cutlasses as I was trying to get the medal, which took 7 minutes and 57 seconds before it finally gave what I was looking for. In the same, not in the same room, but the room just off to the right of the one that that y'all saw me farming the Owl Knight, is a lone gravekeeper. This seemed like the best place for me to farm for them, just so I don't have to deal with any other enemies while trying to get its item drops. It drops the miso soup, which for me dropped an absurd amount of times. I didn't even bother to check to see how many I had by the time it dropped the natto. But, it took 3 minutes and 25 seconds for the miso soup to drop, and then 5 minutes and 50 seconds after that for the natto. Taking the right-hand exit out of the Coliseum, we enter Olrox's quarters, and there's only 2 more enemies to defeat, to get items from, and there are 4 items between them. First off, we have a level 13 Spectral Sword. It's that one that literally sits in the middle of the room. Smack dab in the center. Get surrounded by all kinds of different weapons that apparently this game just, our translators and whatnot, or localizers, decided to call poltergeists. Poltergeists drop waka knives, which are a throwable item. And it took 21 seconds for me to get one of those. Funnily enough, they dropped 2 of them. The Spectral Sword itself drops a broadsword and a bastard sword. It took 3 seconds for the broadsword to drop right after the poltergeists gave up the waka knife. And it took about 1 minute 10 seconds after that for the bastard sword to drop. Funnily enough, 7 seconds after that, in the next room, as far as that long corridor heading to the warp room, the hammer enemy dropped its gold plate. 7 seconds. Literally the very first kill. When the other types, the blade and the Gurkha, did not want to. I'm still flabbergasted over that. From there, I warped over to the outer wall, which only has 2 enemies with 2 items between them. So 1 each. In this case. Near the entrance to the clock tower from the outer wall, I decided to farm the Medusa heads. And thankfully, the 2 different types of Medusa heads are somewhat similar to the Merman in that the 2 different types of Medusa heads have the same item pool. And in our case, we needed to drop the Medusa shield, which took 6 minutes and 55 seconds. I'm pretty sure some of that would have been quicker if I just decided to wait to farm them in the clock tower, but eh. Down in that corridor leading to the save room right before the first doppelganger fight, you can find some level 9 Axe Knights. They're the blue kind of Axe Knights with the shield. We only need 1 item from them, and that's the Axe Lord's shield. Which, thankfully, only took 8 seconds once I entered that room. It was the second kill I got. Alright, moving on to the underground caverns, which has 6 enemies and 9 items between them remaining. First off, we have the Spear Guard, right outside the first save room. If you enter the caverns from the marble gallery entrance, it only took about 32 seconds for it to for one of these 2 to finally drop the Iron Cuirass. Little ways to the left of the save room before the Stula boss fight, you can find a couple toads. And this is where I chose to farm for them, just due to the fact that the drop we are looking for, the pizza, is also dropped by a frog. So that makes farming for them a little bit further in kind of problematic. But these guys were stubborn. They didn't want to drop the pizza for about 9 minutes, 24 seconds. Towards the end of that corridor, we have a group of fish heads that I decided to farm off of there. Now I got the resist ice file. 25 seconds into the farm, and 15 seconds after that, finally got the ice bread. I gotta say, it was kind of hard to tell if they actually did drop the ice bread. That was very difficult to see. In the room that has the bridge leading to the abandoned mine is where I chose to farm the frog. Took a minute 55 seconds for it to drop the knuckle duster, and then it dropped them quite often while I was trying to get the pizza, even though the pizza took about 38 seconds to show up afterwards. Little ways into that same room is the skeleton ape that you need to use to break the bridge, and I use that to farm the TNT that it drops. And it took about 3 minutes, 5 seconds, mostly due to the fact I also had to get rid of the toads and frogs that were in the way. Then all the way in the furthest room of the underground caverns, the one right below the entrance, is where I found the killer fish. Took 38 seconds for it to finally drop an aquamarine, and then 3 minutes and 5 seconds later we got some sushi. From there I entered the abandoned mine, and luckily there's only 1 enemy with 1 item remaining. And oh boy, I really do not care for this enemy. It was excruciatingly stubborn, in dropping the heart refresh. And even though they are a weaker version of the ones that make me extremely nervous in the reverse castle, the Venus Weed is still a pain to deal with due to its attacks. But, it took 16 minutes, 52 seconds for it to finally drop a heart refresh. Interestingly enough, whenever my sword familiar, attacked it, as y'all see in the little bit of footage, it still drops items if something hits it before it fully forms, before it starts growing. I almost forgot to mention the location for the Venus Weed in the abandoned mine. It's in that hallway just past the switch that you need a demon familiar, whether it be the standard demon or the nose demon, to push the button. A little further down, we have the catacombs, with 6 enemies and 11 items between them remaining. A couple rooms to the right of the first save point in the catacombs, we have the were skeleton. Took about 2 minutes, 3 seconds for it to drop the garnet. The bone arc is our next enemy, and well, this one is a bit of a thing just due to the fact that the priests carrying the bone arc around do technically count as their own entry, even though they aren't in the enemy librarian's enemy list. And the skeleton priests were the first enemy to drop an item, which is the only item they carry, the monster vial 3. 4 minutes, 55 seconds into the farm. About a minute, 25 seconds after that, the bone arc finally dropped its monster vial 3. And, well, the skull shield took 4 minutes, 12 seconds. I was so anxious to get that clip that I ended up messing it up. And so instead, I just ended up taking a screenshot of my standing there while the skull shield name is on the bottom left, showing that I did indeed pick it up. So, my apologies on that. In that big room, shortly before before the passageways leading to either side of the catacombs, we have like 3 different gremlins roaming around. And I got a fair number of resist fires from these guys while I was farming for the fire mill, the only item I needed from it at this point. 5 minutes, 45 seconds. Up next, we have an enemy that honestly, it's simple enough to deal with, but I didn't like farming from it just due to the fact that it, on both sides of the hallway it's in, the Hellfire Beast has a couple of grave keepers in the room with it. He was a stubborn one, though, as far as the drops go. Took a minute, 57 seconds for the fire melt to drop, and I got a fair number from him while I was trying to get the lightning melt, which took 12 minutes and 45 seconds. A couple hallways later, if memory serves, we have the Lhasa. It didn't take me long to farm these guys for their items. 30 seconds for the firebrand, and 6 seconds after that for the sirloin. And one more room past that, we have yet another armor-type enemy, the Discus Lord. It only took 40 seconds for it to drop a chakram. And then a minute, 26 seconds after that for the Jewel Sword. Its death animation is pretty cool, but I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of obnoxious. just due to the fact that you can't see if it dropped anything. And waiting for the death animation to finish to see if it did drop anything lowers your chances of picking up any dropped items that it may have dropped. So yeah, fun times. We're almost done here. Next up, we have the Long Library, with 5 enemies, 8 items between them, not including the stuff in the shop. First off, we have the Flea Man, which I decided to farm the room that has the first room that has them, meaning I got to deal with the Durons while farming these guys. Little did I recall that well, there was a better farm a little further in. Anyways, we're after both drops. The Takemitsu took me 12 seconds, and the cheese took 2 minutes and 18 seconds after that. So about 2 minutes 30 seconds to get both items from the Fleaman. Before moving on to the next enemy, I decided to go ahead and get the last item that the Master Librarian drops if you juggle him from below enough times. And that's the Axe Lord armor. Took me 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And that's including the one time that I had to wait for my MP to recharge back to full before I continued. But moving on, in the first part of that large room that makes up the vast majority of the Long Library, we have the Ectoplasm. It took me 55 seconds to get the Uncurse, and 2 minutes and 10 seconds to get the Mana Prism. So yeah, 3 minutes, 5 seconds. Not too bad, not too bad. Funnily enough, it only took me 10 seconds of farming the Spellbook, which is the next enemy, to get the Pentagram. Up next, we have a rather annoying set of enemies to get to as far as their location goes. But we have the Magic Tome. They're located in the upper right area where you find one of the relics. I don't remember which one. I think it might have been the fairy scroll or whatever the heck it's called. But it took me 1 minute and 22 seconds for the saber to drop, which you'd think that would be at the top of the list on the little item thing. On the info that the Master Librarian has. And it took 4 minutes and 37 seconds after that for it to finally drop the $2,000 bag. In total, 5 minutes, 59 seconds. In that semi-large room right before where you would fight the lesser demon as a boss, that's where I farmed the flea armor. And it took 1 minute and 15 seconds for it to drop the Iron Cuirass, and go figure, in my case, it was the last of the flea armors on that run through of the room. Now, here's a little side thing that happened on my way out of the Long Library, primarily on my way to the save room nearby, where the flea armors are. My sword familiar reached level 50, and because I was busy dashing through in wolf form, I only got to catch the tail end of it as I was making my way to save. Oh yeah, figured I'd include that and show at least the last bit of it. Moving on, our next area is the Clock Tower, with 7 enemies and 12 items between them. First off, we have the Sword Lord, which, funnily enough, I ended up getting on the way out to the outer wall's topmost save point, so I'm including this first. And it only took 1 kill from it. I was gonna just kill it, move on, because I felt like doing so. And it dropped the Bekatoa. After that, just inside the, technically the second room of the clock tower from the outer wall, we have those little skull enemies called the Phantom Skull. We've only got one item from these guys. It's the felt hat. Or one item remaining for these guys. And it took me 3 minutes, 30 seconds. Partly because, well, I was initially going through the whole room instead of just focusing on the first 2 Phantom Skulls. Up next, we have the Skull Lord, which is the larger version of the Phantom Skull, found at the very bottom of the room, where there are 3 of them. It took 40 seconds for these things to drop the scimitar, and then because it took me a while to finally be like, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna farm off of one of them, it took me 15 minutes and 56 seconds for it to drop the Skull Shield. So in total, 16 minutes and 36 seconds. Near the entrance to the part of the clock tower that has the Medusa heads, I decided to farm the Flell Guard for his item. First off, got the pot roast in 24 seconds. 59 seconds later, we got the Morning Star. The second room with all the gears is where I decided to fight all the harpies, because, well, I mean, that's where they first spawn. And I farmed off of the one at the very bottom of the room. I got the apple in 1 minute and 28 seconds. It would have been a little bit less if I had realized that it had dropped an apple instead of one of the red money bags. Whoops. Oh well, I managed to catch that in the time that I captured. 4 minutes, 1 second later, it finally dropped the life apple after so many times that it dropped a gold money bag. Didn't much care for it, even though it didn't take me very long, seeing as it was a total of 5 minutes, 29 seconds for both items. Now, I did myself a little bit of a oops with the next enemy, which is the Cloaked Knight. I went ahead and decided to farm this guy in the regular castle when it would have been better for me to farm it in the reverse clock tower. Oh well. Make do with what you got. 2 minutes, 7 seconds into the item grind on this enemy, it finally drops a Flamberger. And then it took 19 minutes, 41 seconds for it to finally drop its very rare item drop, the Heaven Sword. And no, I'm not going for a second one. No, thank you. The final enemy in this area is the Vandal Sword, which is the last enemy in the clock tower before you reach the boss room where Karsaman is. Vandal Sword. Now, one thing of note, Vandal Swords only show up when you kill the Sword Lords in that room with the pendulums you have to use, unless you have the means to get up there easier. Anyways, it took 1 minute and 45 seconds for it to drop the Holy Sword, and 2 minutes 42 seconds after that for it to finally drop a Muramasa. This was the room that I was going to farm the Sword Lords in, and funnily enough, one of them did drop a Bekatoa while I was farming the Vandal Swords. Moving on to the final area of the normal castle as far as remaining items go. The Castle Keep. It has 1 enemy, 2 items. And it's the Flea Rider. I did not like farming this thing. It was just, I don't like their placement in the room that they're in. That's all it is. It took 5 minutes, 53 seconds for it to drop a turkey, and 11 minutes, 34 seconds for it to finally drop a ham and egg. It dropped like 5 different turkeys during that time. So about 17 minutes, 27 seconds. Yay. Anyways, that wraps up the item grind for the regular castle. And that's also where we will be calling it for part 8. Part 9 is going to take about as long, maybe a little bit longer. You never know, because it's all dependent on how long it takes for these enemies to drop their items. So in the meantime, I will still be working on making more content to put out, so don't worry about that. And if you want to catch me while I'm live with my friends, go check out the NovaCast on the weekends. I drawn a blank on the time. I think it's 7 p.m. East Pacific and 10 p.m. Eastern. I could be wrong. If my friend MJ watches this and lets me know, corrects me if I'm wrong, that would be amazing. Anyways, thank y'all very much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed. And as always, until next time, y'all take care. Just wanted to make a small change to what I said at the end there. I'll instead be filling out the remaining map tiles in part 9. Instead of continuing with the item grind. This way, I get a small enough break from the item grind. And I can also show a few things off, as well as like where I'm going to be grinding for money once I'm done with the item grind, stuff like that. Plus, if it lowers the number of items I'm going to need to get, that's even better. Now, don't worry, I will still be finishing this particular run. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm starting to feel burnout. It feels like it's creeping in. And because of that, I'm at a point where I'm questioning whether or not I want to even attempt something like this in the remaining games of the franchise when I get around to them. And that's especially including the ones that have the luck stat bugged to where it doesn't work. Anyways, let me know what your thoughts on the matter are down in the comments. I'd very much appreciate it. And I'll see y'all next time.